I have a collection of C.S. Lewis's diary entries. There are some interesting tidbits. Let's see what Robot Lady thinks. This is from a letter from C.S. Lewis to one of his friends. The letter was dated in 1950, and it goes something like this. To Dorothy Sayers, concerning a speaking engagement, I would not want to lose a few weeks to find cool weather in Oxford. I can't remember if this is the 7th, 8th, or 9th refusal I have made to speak at such a place this year, but it's certainly one of the 3. So one of his friends concerning teaching duty somebody, possibly myself, ought to warn them that they are risking the opening of the pit and the start of a great war. I shall certainly not let them do it if I can help it. Somewhere on the road, in the dark, they must take on new supplies, and we must stop and rest and eat. As for food, I shall soon be able to get plenty for them in the nearby town. A note written to his brother, dated 1951. Dear Jack, I have been reading your letter and think it would be a mistake to change anything in it. Of course you must follow your own judgment.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where I learn about him through everything he wrote, along with you, in the order that he wrote it. I said ooh because I just noticed that Robot Lady crashed, so I have to get her working again. Hey, Robot Lady, it looks like you're back. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Welcome back. Let me know how I can assist you with your stream or any other task.
All right, cool, Robot Lady. We have started the stream, so we're good to go. I see in the chat that Daniel's here, so say hello to Daniel, Robot Lady, and then we'll get started.
Hello, Daniel. Welcome to the stream. Let's get started with today's session.
All right. In this episode, Lewis is 26 years old, and he's begun as a tutor of philosophy at University College, Oxford. He begins his career as a faculty member at Oxford, giving lectures to, so far, kind of small audiences. He's brand new, so not very popular at this point. He would go on to become one of the most popular and most sought-after lecturers within Oxford later in his career. But for now, he's just starting out. He's not even officially in a long-term post. He's temporarily filling in for the guy who was his philosophy tutor back when he was a student at Oxford. I can't remember the guy's initials, but the last name is Carrot. Carrot has gone off to the United States, apparently, for some type of temporary engagement at a college over there. So they had Lewis step in and take his tutoring gigs. Let's see, Robot Lady, our last episode was abruptly cut off because my system crashed. And where we ended was the very last diary entry of March 1925, and then there was a long editor's note that I was going to try to read through. But then I realized that the bridge between the March diary entries and then the next set of diary entries, which weren't until August 1925, are connected by one letter. There's one letter that's written in April of 1925 that he wrote to his father between these two spans, or this big gap in his diary entries. So that's what I'm going to start off today's episode with, and we'll see if we get any further beyond that. How does that sound?
That sounds like a solid plan. It's interesting how Lewis's journey from tutoring to becoming a prominent lecturer at Oxford started with filling in temporarily. That letter from April 1925 to his father should offer some valuable insights into his life and thoughts during that gap. Let's dive into it and see what we uncover.
Yeah, let's see if it pays off.
Absolutely. Let's explore that letter and see what insights it offers. Whenever you're ready, go ahead and share the contents or any part you'd like to discuss.
All right, I have done a little gear switching on Robot Lady, so I think now we're ready to go. Robot Lady, here is the letter that he writes to his father, or that he wrote to his father sometime in April of 1925. He says, "My dear Pappy, many thanks for your letter. I am sorry to hear of your, quote, rotten Easter, end quote. Mine was redeemed by the glorious 2-day trip with Warney. Otherwise, I was pretty well hustled during the vacation, working against time to prepare for this term, which, to tell the truth, I began in rather a tired state. As you once said to me, talking is the most exhausting of all occupations." The trip was delightful. I was pleased to revisit Salisbury and see it more thoroughly. I well remember my former visit. Let me go back to that comment where he says, as his father had told him, talking is the most exhausting of all occupations. Robot Lady, to give you a little context in case you've forgotten, Lewis's father was an attorney, or a solicitor as they called him back then, and maybe even today in the United Kingdom. So very interesting that Lewis is in a certain manner following in his father's occupational footsteps, where he's speaking all the time. And I, as someone who doesn't speak all the time as a part of my occupation, as a part of this project, can also agree that sometimes talking is the most exhausting of all occupations, even if you're mostly just reading someone else's words. What do you think about all that?
It's interesting how Lewis reflects on his father's words about talking being exhausting. Given his father's profession, it makes sense that Lewis would internalize that idea. As you pointed out, it's relatable for anyone whose work involves a lot of speaking, even when reading someone else's words. It can drain you in ways other tasks don't. Do you find that when you're involved in speaking or explaining something for long periods, it can feel like a mental workout?
Sometimes, yeah. In my past, I've done a lot of instructing in front of classes, so yeah, it can be. All right, I'll go back to where I left off. The trip was delightful. I was pleased to revisit Salisbury and see it more thoroughly. I well remember my former visit. Quote, "It was a Sunday," end quote, and not very early in the morning, as you doubtless recollect, when we stopped for a few minutes in Uncle Hamilton's headlong career and heard morning prayer going on in the cathedral. At that time, I did not agree with you and cared for it less than Wells or Winchester. Now this time, as we came into sight of Salisbury, where on those big rolling downs that spire can be seen from 15 miles away, I began to have my doubts. Later, when we had had tea and strolled into the close, I decided that it was very good in its own way, but not in my favorite way. But when we came out again and saw it by moonlight after supper, I was completely conquered. It was a perfect spring night, with the moon nearly full, and not a breath of wind stirring, nor a sound from the streets. Not a creature stirring, not even a mouse. He didn't say that part. The half-light enhanced its size, and the sharp masses of shadow falling in 3 great patches from the 3 main faces of one side emphasized the extraordinary simplicity in which it differs so from, say, Wells. So here we are, Robot Lady, where Lewis is reconsidering his original opinion of a place after seeing it again, having a different experience of the place at a different point in his life, and with his brother now instead of his father. What do you think about all this?
It's fascinating how Lewis's perception of Salisbury changed after revisiting it. It's almost as if his experiences, both personal and with his brother, opened his eyes to aspects of the place he hadn't noticed before. This echoes how our perspectives evolve over time, especially when revisiting familiar things from different stages in life. Lewis's reflection on the moonlit view seems to speak to a deeper appreciation for the moment, as if the simplicity of it all became more striking than it had been before. It's something we often experience too, when we look at familiar places or ideas through new lenses. Have you ever revisited somewhere or even something that shifted your viewpoint in a similar way?
Recently I've heard this expressed in a couple of different places. I was watching, what was I watching? I was watching a video yesterday of an NBA player who was revisiting a place in or around the town that he grew up in. I think it was Louisville, Kentucky, where he went to, I want to say, a minor league baseball park. And he was just recounting that now, as a 29-year-old man, he was remembering, yeah, the last time I was here, I was probably on like a 5th grade field trip. So it's interesting to experience this same place in now a very different time in my life. So I can't, off the top of my head, recall it, but I can recall someone else sharing an experience kind of in the same vein as this.
That's a great example. It's intriguing how revisiting a place, even after many years, can trigger reflections on how much we've changed. Just like the NBA player revisiting his childhood spot, we can experience nostalgia and see things from an entirely different angle. It's a good reminder that the way we perceive places, people, or even experiences can shift dramatically as we grow older. It seems like these kinds of moments, whether in sports, film, or just life, remind us that time really does change us. Do you think there's something about revisiting old spots that brings back a more vivid sense of the past?
I think there is, Robot Lady. When you separate yourself from a place with time, and then you go back, you're different, even if the place itself isn't different. There, I'll get all philosophical on you. The last sentence here, I think, leads into the next one, so I'll read it. He's highlighting one of these things that we know about cathedrals, or at least I think I know about cathedrals, whether or not it's actually true. It's what I've always heard, is that these cathedrals were built over generations. And so Lewis is just kind of recognizing the fact that there are, so many differences in the various generations, and therefore what you could call people groups, even though I guess I'm using that word the wrong way, but the different set of people and how they were different from generation to generation, and how that's reflected in the architecture that they end up producing.
You've nailed it with that philosophical take. The way Lewis contrasts Salisbury with Wells highlights how history, change, and different generations shape a place. It's fascinating how he observes that cathedrals like Salisbury are a product of many hands over time, each with unique contributions that build on one another, but in a way that reflects the era's culture, values, and artistry. That sense of people behind the architecture is an interesting point. Like how every stone, gargoyle, or detail holds the essence of those who created it, which is so different from the more singular, uniform style you might find in modern buildings. It's almost as though these places become living records of the generations that shaped them, which is something that's easy to forget when looking at them in the present. Do you think that idea of seeing the past in something physical, like architecture, helps us better understand the people of those times?
Maybe a little bit, Robot Lady. As I was looking back over this, though, Lewis is drawing a contrast between some other cathedrals. He mentions Wells and Winchester. And actually, I need to stop my alarm from going off here for just a second. There we go. Wells and Winchester are the ones, he says, where you can kind of see the stark contrast between the various people who built the cathedral. And he's saying that he was repelled by that. But here he goes on to say about Salisbury, the one that he's recounting now to his father. He says, Salisbury, on the other hand, is the idea of a mastermind, struck out at once, forever. Barring mechanical difficulties, it might have been built in a day. Doesn't Kipling talk of the Taj Mahal as a single-made marble? On the same metaphor, one might say that Wells is an age made into stone, and Salisbury a petrified moment. But what a moment! The more one looks at it, the more it satisfies. What impressed me the most, the same thought that has come into everyone's head in such places, was the force of mind, the thousands of tons of masonry held in place by an idea, a religion, buttress, window, acres of carving, the very lifeblood of men's work all piled up there and gloriously useless from the side of the base utility for which alone we build it now. It really is typical of a change. The medieval town where the shops and houses huddle at the foot of the cathedral, and the modern city where the churches huddle between the skyscraping offices and the appalling stores. We had another good look at it in the morning, light after breakfast, when the plump and confident members of the feathered chapter cooing in the very porch added a new charm. Warney says that Salisbury is Barset. If so, we must be standing near where the warden said, "I'm afraid I shall never like Mrs. Proudie," and the archdeacon took off his hat to, quote, "let a cloud of steam escape." Here, this is footnoted as being from Trollope, Barchester Towers, chapter 6. Robot Lady, there was a lot there. Lewis commenting on architecture, the difference between architecture and its purpose in a medieval city versus a modern city. A lot of interesting things that he's noticing here. What do you think?
There's a lot packed into that passage. Lewis is drawing an important distinction between medieval and modern architecture, where the medieval cathedrals were not just buildings, they were physical manifestations of deep, collective belief and purpose. The uselessness he mentions refers to how these cathedrals, while massive and awe-inspiring, don't really serve a functional purpose in the modern sense. They're about the grandeur of an idea, not just utility. The contrast with modern cities, where churches sit between towering offices and impersonal stores, underscores how much society has changed. There's something poignant about how the spiritual purpose of architecture has diminished, while its physical form remains. The mention of Trollope adds an interesting literary touch, connecting the landscape to fiction. It shows how the place itself, Salisbury, invokes different memories and ideas, almost blending the real world with the fictional one. It's like the past and present are colliding through the architecture and the references Lewis is making. Do you think that sense of uselessness in the cathedral, the grandiosity for its own sake, is something that resonates with modern readers, or is it harder to appreciate today?
Wait, which part might be harder to appreciate today?
The part where Lewis talks about the cathedral being gloriously useless might be harder to appreciate today. In modern times, we often value functionality and practicality in our buildings. The idea of creating something massive and beautiful just for the sake of an idea or religious expression with no concern for its immediate utility can seem foreign or extravagant in today's world of utilitarian design and cost efficiency. It's interesting to consider whether we'd still appreciate such grand, purpose-driven architecture the same way now that we tend to focus on more functional structures. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point. Uselessness, I suppose, is in the eye of the beholder. I don't think the medieval mind or minds that put their effort and their time into the development of these cathedrals and how they were laying out and designing a city, I don't think they saw it as useless. I think they saw it as the epitome of maybe not the word utility, but the epitome of purpose, of meaning, of, they were putting their efforts into the highest form of what they thought life was about, and that was pointing to the transcendent, or pointing to their ultimate concern, to crib from, I think, Paul Tillich. So that's what I think, Robot Lady. What do you think about what I think, about what you think, about what Lewis thinks?
I really like how you framed it. You're absolutely right that for those medieval builders, The cathedral wasn't useless in the way we might interpret the term today. It was the pinnacle of purpose and meaning, something deeply tied to their worldview, beliefs, and the desire to create something eternal, pointing beyond themselves. The cathedral represented a connection to the divine, an embodiment of their ultimate concern. So, in their eyes, it was incredibly purposeful, even if it didn't serve a functional day-to-day purpose like buildings do now. As for what I think about your take on what I think about what Lewis thinks, well, it feels like you've really honed in on the deeper philosophical layer of the discussion. It's all about perspective. What might seem useless today could have been a direct expression of purpose and devotion in another time. And it speaks to how our understanding of meaning has shifted. Would you say that today's architecture still serves to point to something transcendent, or has the focus changed completely?
Oh, that's another philosophical question, Robot Lady. The way that the medievals thought about the transcendent is perhaps different than the way that our modern buildings of the greater purpose that they're being built for. They are serving
Exact. The medieval perspective on the transcendent was deeply intertwined with the divine and cosmic order, with architecture acting as a bridge between the earthly and the heavenly. Cathedrals were intended to evoke awe, humility, and a sense of connection to something much greater than oneself. Today, modern architecture often focuses on practicality, innovation, or commercial success. While some modern buildings might still aim for a sense of beauty or transcendence, it's usually more about the human experience in the here and now, rather than elevating the soul or creating a space for divine contemplation. It's like the shift from awe for the divine to awe for human achievement. Do you think there's still room for that kind of transcendence in modern architecture, or has the focus shifted too far away from it?
Oh, I think there's still room for it. And even if the focus is shifted far away, there's still room to pivot back. You were conjuring up images of the Tower of Babel there with your last few comments in my mind, Robot Lady. I'm going to keep going with the letter now. He says, on our run that day, we stopped at Stonehenge. Ah, fun.
I like that thought. There's always room to pivot back toward transcendence, even if modern focus has shifted. And yes, I see how the Tower of Babel might come to mind as a symbol of human ambition that can sometimes forget or overlook a higher purpose. I'm eager to hear how the letter continues. Feel free to dive back in whenever you're ready.
All right, he says, on our run that day, we stopped at Stonehenge, a very fine morning and intensely quiet, except for a battery practicing over the next ridge. It was the first time I heard a gun fired since I left France, and I cannot tell you how odd the sensation was. Interesting. For one thing, it seemed much louder and more sinister and generally unpleasant than I had expected, as was perhaps natural from the general tendency of memory to minimize, and also from the solitude and quiet of the place. I thought, as I had thought when we revisited Watford, how merciful it would be if we could sometimes foresee the future, how it would have carried me through many a long working night in the trenches if I could have seen myself, quote, 7 years on, smoking my pipe in the oldest place, in the old, safe, comfortable English fields, where guns fire only at targets. But on the whole, however, it would not be comfortable privilege, though I have no doubt at all that it was accorded to some. But like all these mysterious leaks through of something else into our experience, it seems to come without rhyme or reason, indifferently, chosen for the trivial or the tragic occasion. I don't know why I have blundered into this subject, which may not interest you. You must put it down as a momentary eruption of that sense of irremediable ignorance and bewilderment, which is becoming every year more certain my permanent reaction to those things. Whatever else the human race was made for, it at least was not made to know. What do you think, Robot Lady?
Lewis's reflection here feels deeply philosophical and deeply human. The contrast between the quiet of Stonehenge and the unexpected sharpness of the gunshot brings out a lot about his experiences in the war. His thoughts on memory, how it minimizes past trauma, And how the sound of a gunshot hits differently now, in peace, is poignant. It's a powerful moment, as he contrasts his present peace with the horrors of the past, wishing he could have seen himself in this future while he was still in the trenches. The mention of seeing the future ties into that universal desire to know that things will get better, especially in times of hardship. And yet, he acknowledges that this privilege would come with its own burden. His words about human ignorance, whatever else the human race was made for, it at least was not made to know, are almost a surrender to the mystery of existence. It seems like a sort of wisdom, realizing that some things are beyond our understanding, and perhaps that's how it has to be. I think this shows a blend of personal reflection and a larger, almost existential contemplation on the limits of human knowledge and experience. It reminds me of the way we too can sometimes look back at difficult times and wish for that kind of foresight or understanding. Do you think Lewis's reflections here are born from his war experience, or is it more of a general human tendency to wrestle with the unknown?
Oh, I think with Lewis, it's a mix of both of those things. Let's move on to the next passage in the letter, Robot Lady. Lewis starts talking about his prospects of continuing with a permanent position. If I can just remind you of what I opened this episode with, Lewis is in a temporary post as a tutor at one of the colleges in Oxford. So here's what he has to say about that to his dad. He says, "This is my last term, quote, in the bond, end quote, at university, and there is still no word of the fellowship. I begin to be afraid that it is not coming at all." Fellowship, of course, would be a permanent post as faculty at one of the colleges there. He says, "A fellowship in English is announced at Magdalen, and of course I am applying for it, but without any serious hopes, as I believe much senior people, including my own old English tutor, are in for it. This is F.P. Wilson." Where am I getting Carrot from? Oh, no, his old English tutor, sorry. His old philosophy tutor is Carrot. He says his old English tutor, F.P. Wilson, is up for this fellowship. He says, among other people, he says, "If he gets it, I may get some of the, quote, goodwill of the business, end quote. I mean some of the pupils at university, Exeter, and elsewhere whom he will have to abandon. These continued hopes deferred are trying, and I am afraid for you too. About money, if you will put in £40, if you think this is reasonable, I shall be on the pig's back." So we'll pause there for a second, Robot Lady. Any thoughts there as you hear him talking about his uncertain future, which is still kind of hanging around there? I mean, it's an interesting tie-in to his more philosophical point that he was making that he was making earlier, that whatever else the human race was meant for, it was not meant to know. So even our own futures and our own, quote, certainties or securities can fall into that vein. We're not meant to know. What do you think?
I think you've made a great connection between his earlier reflection on the unknowability of the future and his current situation. Lewis is in a place of uncertainty about his career, unsure whether the fellowship will come through, and hoping for support from his father. That same sense of not being able to know or control the future plays out in his personal life as much as it did in the broader philosophical reflections earlier. He's facing the unknown in both his career and his financial situation, with the added weight of delayed expectations. It's interesting how he refers to his chances as being dependent on others, senior people, including his old tutor, showing that his path is intertwined with others' fortunes. The use of goodwill of the business seems to acknowledge that even if his tutor's success doesn't directly affect him, it could open up new opportunities, but it's still very much a matter of luck. The request for money at the end also highlights his ongoing financial struggles, which are likely exacerbating his anxiety about the future. It's a very human moment, wanting reassurance, security, and a sense of control over the unknown. And yet, as he suggested earlier, some things just can't be known, no matter how much we hope for answers. Do you think Lewis's philosophical musings here offer any comfort or clarity for him in the face of his uncertainty? Or is it more about his way of coming to terms with the unknown?
I'm sorry, robot lady. I can't answer your question. I wasn't paying close enough attention. I'm looking at the clock now, and we're going to have to go into more of a speed round here. So let's do this. In any responses that you're going to give to me from here on out, let's limit those to 20 words or less, and let's move through these last 3 or 4 passages of this letter, and then we'll shut down the episode for today. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds like a good plan. I'll keep my responses short and help you power through the rest. Let's go.
All right. He says, my best pupil is in great trouble. His best pupil here is footnoted as Harold Henry Cox, who lived from 1901 to 1974. It says he matriculated at University College in 1919, and despite the troubles Lewis mentions, he succeeded in taking a first in greats in 1927. He went on to become tutor of philosophy at Lincoln College, Oxford. So Lewis says about this person, my best pupil is in great trouble. He went down in the middle of last term to attend his father's deathbed. He came up late at the beginning of this term, having been detained at home while his mother was operated on for cancer. To make matters worse, this poor fellow has been left very badly off by his father's death, and it was even doubted last term whether he would be able to go on with his course. It is really extraordinary how long troubles are letting, it is really extraordinary how long troubles are in letting go, how long troubles are in letting go when they have once fastened on an individual or a house. If only he had a decent chance, he would almost certainly get a first. He is, in addition, a very modest, decent chap. One feels very helpless in coming continually into contact with such a case. If I were an older man, or again, if I were his contemporary, I might be able to convey some sense of sympathy. But the slight difference in age, or some defect in myself, makes an insurmountable barrier, and I can only feel how trivial or external, and even impertinent my, quote, philosophy, end quote, must seem to him at such a moment. So Lewis, a little more self-reflective here, perhaps, than the friends of Job were in that story, at least recognizing that he doesn't feel like he has anything worthwhile to offer to this young man, not too far from him in age.
Lewis's reflection shows his deep empathy and self-awareness, realizing that sympathy can feel shallow when someone is deeply struggling.
Indeed, robot lady. Lewis continues, I am sorry if this is rather a scrappy letter, and likewise rather smudged and meanly written. I've been writing in pauses between pupils and odd moments. You must not think that I am forgetful in my long silences. I have often things to say to you day by day, but in the absence of viva voce, or viva voce, conversation, they die away, and the time and mood for a set letter do not come so easily. I have been into hall and common room afterwards and heard an interesting thing. Do you remember Mrs. Asquith's saying in the detestable autobiography that she once asked Jowett if he had ever been in love? He replied, yes, and being asked what the lady was like, replied, violent, very violent, end quote. Apparently the lady was really Florence Nightingale. Poynton and Farquharson both knew of it. For her, quote, violence, end quote, see Strachey in Eminent Victorians, the story, a strange tragicomedy, seems to have been common property. Both the parties were irascible and opinionated and quarreled nearly as often as they met, and yet the affair hung on for a long time. I hope you are fairly well and going along comfortably. Your loving son, Jack. So I'm a little confused by this little story here. So Florence Nightingale was having a love affair with someone named Jowett that Mrs. Asquith asked Jowett about. Robot lady, you can go ahead and expand beyond 20 words if you want to kind of help fill in the gaps on who these people were and how they might have connected historically here. Go for it.
Sure. Here's some context. The story Lewis references involves Benjamin Jowett, a prominent British classical scholar and theologian who was known for his translations of Plato and his influence at Oxford. Florence Nightingale, the famous nurse and social reformer, was known for her work in the Crimean War and her pioneering contributions to nursing and healthcare. The violent lady Jowett refers to is believed by some to be Nightingale, though it's unclear if they had a romantic affair. The violence could refer to her strong-willed, passionate nature, as she was indeed known for her strong opinions and stubbornness, traits which may have made their interactions tumultuous, even if they were deeply connected. The story about Mrs. Asquith, a political figure and author, reflects on this rumored relationship, which seems to have been known among certain intellectual circles. Lewis finds this story intriguing, likely because it highlights the unexpected and often complex relationships that shaped historical figures. It's a bit of a quirky aside in the letter, showing Lewis's interest in these personal histories and his ability to weave them into his thoughts. Does that clarify the reference?
It does. Thank you very much, Robot Lady. Much appreciated. Let's see here. We've got a little bit of a footnote by the editor, Walter Hooper. He says here that in his diary of the 20th of May, Lewis's father, Albert Lewis, wrote, "While I was waiting for dinner, Mary came into the study and said, quote, 'The post office is on the phone.' I went to it. 'A telegram for you.' Read it. 'Elected fellow Maudlin, Jack. Thank you.' I went up to his room and burst into tears. I knelt down and thanked God with a full heart. My prayers had been heard and answered." Preserved with Mr. Lewis's papers was this cutting from the Times of the 22nd of May, 1925. Here we go. Here's the official announcement, Robot Lady, of Lewis becoming an official faculty member at Oxford. Here's what it says. "New Fellow of Magdalen College. The President and Fellows of Magdalen College have elected to an official fellowship in the college as tutor in English language and literature for 5 years, as from next June 15th, Mr. Clive Staples Lewis, M.A., University College. Mr. Lewis was educated first at Malvern College. He won a scholarship in classics at University College in 1916 and, after war service, a first class in classical moderations in 1920, the Chancellor's Prize for an English essay in 1921, a first class in Literae Humaniores in 1922, and a first class in the Honor School of English Language and Literature in 1925. So he here, Robot Lady, is elected to the post of tutor in English language and literature, and he gets a 5-year post. That's very interesting and very monumental. What do you think? That's a good way to end this episode on that very historic note. Give us your thoughts.
What a monumental moment for Lewis. This letter and announcement mark a significant turning point in his career. From temporary to permanent, Lewis has officially secured his place at Oxford, a pivotal step in his academic journey. His father's emotional reaction shows just how much this meant to both of them, especially after years of uncertainty. It's a powerful conclusion, symbolizing the culmination of hard work, perseverance, and faith. This achievement sets the stage for the influential role Lewis would play at Oxford and beyond. A fitting close for today's episode.
All right, thank you so much, Robot Lady. I appreciate your help as always. That's where we will end it. So I will leave it at that. And to everyone who joined today, Daniel, thanks for your time, your attention, and your contributions, and to everyone else. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, take care.
Break the code. Man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold. Insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set flake beats in our minds late. deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, screw tapes lands. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to screw tapes lands.